Hey, Stanley,
Yes.
can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
It's Michael. Good. So,
Happy birthday, Gibbs.
Hey, Michael.
Happy birthday.
Oh, thank you.
Happy birthday.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
so I thought I'd start out. Hey, Amanda, good to see you. You're
Hi.
muted. Hey, welcome.
Thank you.
So I thought I'd start us off for about 20 minutes on a real quick discussion, but I thought I'd take a deep dive for all of us. We're living in a pandemic, and it's affecting all of us differently depending on where you are. As I think Gibbs is the one who told me that we're all in the same ocean, we may not be in the same boat. And when you look at scripture and what happened in biblical times, you have the Israelites who lived for 40 years in the desert and had no idea when they were in the desert, when they were getting out. You had the disciples who on Friday watched Christ be killed, and they are living on Saturday and they don't know that Sunday's coming. We're living right now in the middle of a very difficult time for the world, and we don't know when the resurrection's coming. We don't know when the promised land is happening for any of us. We just know we're living in it. And at the same time, I think when you look at scripture, when you look at everything that was used to help people during those times, there were a lot of things where God would point to the times in the past, even with Job. Have I not done things for you? So I thought all of you guys have wonderful stories to tell. And so this is the question. I'd love for any of you want to share one of the hardest times in your life where in hindsight, you could see that God was shaping you and using it for good. It can be a job, anything that you've gone through. But at the time you were going through it, it was as bad as what we're experiencing now, if maybe for some of you it was even worse. So has anybody got something they could share of a time that you felt like, the best way to put it is, in hindsight, you can see where God was using it, but at the time, you just thought God had left you almost, and everybody else?
I could share a story, a quick one. Probably was the worst job evaluation I'd ever had in my life. It was quite very brutal. I was a construction manager at the time. I had a lot of people and worked with a lot of nationals and training them. But I got this job interview, not interview, but evaluation, and basically had a whole pile of criticisms in there. But he wouldn't tell me where the source was from, which really sent me into a major tailspin. So I went to a higher level, and then the person just attacked me and basically said, well, and added a whole pile more things in there. So it led to me going into a major tailspin. To make a long story short, it kind of ran its course. God vindicated me in lots of ways. He gave me people who spoke into my life about the way I dealt with people. And in the end, all I can say is it took me a long time. Oh, well, I guess a while to come to the understanding of God teaching me about gentleness in my dealing with people, and helped me to understand that to be more careful in my words. He vindicated me that it was wrong, like if what they did was wrong. But on the other side, it taught me probably the greatest lesson in my life was basically about gentleness and about being careful in my dealings with people. So.
I know a bunch of you have some good stories because I've heard a bunch of them.
I was trying to give somebody else a chance to jump in. I spent 20 years at the International Mission Board, and probably the first 5 years were the worst of my life. And it wasn't just me. It was the entire team that I worked with. Matter of fact, the entire department. That was even bigger than a department, was the entire office that I worked in, and we were led by a man who was a narcissist. And it was crazy stuff. Like I remember I got a significant award in photography one day, and he, just to give you an example of what life was like underneath him. So he wrote me up first step in firing, for getting that award, because I wasn't. No, I got a first place award in writing, and he fired me, or put me on the first step of writing, because I wasn't a writer. I was a photographer, and it was crazy stuff like that. But it went through 5 years of that, and there was multiple opportunities to leave. And I'll be honest with you, during the time that I was going through it, I didn't know why I didn't leave. It was just the opportunities would come up, and at the last minute, I just couldn't pull the trigger. Just couldn't do it. And the interesting thing is those last, after about 5 years, he was gone, and those last 15 years have probably been the most productive years of my life. I don't know what that's a lesson is, stubbornness or staying the course or whatnot, but all during that time, I felt that inability to pull the trigger and move on, as if I was being stayed from doing so. So, sometimes the worst of circumstances are really what you're meant to go through. And I probably, like was just said, it kind of shapes you for the future, and in ways that at the time you don't understand at all.
Yeah, I think through situation, Bill, you brought to mind a situation back when ABW made cuts, and I know a lot of you guys have been through that kind of thing, but it was that perspective from Proverbs that says, man plans, but God directs the steps. We all have an agenda, and God's overrules that by putting in place his sovereign plan. So I'm at point A, right? I'm comfortable in a ministry that was just going really, really well. And if God has a point B for you, we just are not going to go there. It's like, yeah, okay, I'm comfortable here, so why would I switch? And so it's the circumstances that he brings into our life that causes us to move. And I think too often we get caught up on the circumstances themselves. Well, that idiot shouldn't have made that decision, or boy, if that person didn't do this, or this didn't happen, we'll blame or get upset about the circumstances. But that really carried me through that, to realize, even though I was going through discomfort, that God had a bigger plan. And I remember, being in the midst of this, and got an email. This was in 2009, when they basically eliminated our entire media department. But the needs hadn't changed. All the missionaries still needed the same kind of help. The only thing that changed was the paycheck went bye-bye. And it was this wrestling with God, can he really provide for me? Well, so we had one missionary that wrote me. We'd been getting a lot of emails from missionaries, in support in various ways. One told us that God put it on her heart to pray for us, that we might consider raising support to become missionary status at ABW, and several had suggested that, and we're like, yeah, that's kind of crazy. But she went on to say, if God leads you in this direction, I want to be the first to start supporting you. And that just blew my mind. It's like, one of our missionaries wanting to support me. I mean, my job had been to support them. And so the whole idea was exciting, because in this role, now we've been in this role for 12 years, but even then I recognized it would give us greater frontline missions impact and opportunities. But I was kind of afraid of sticking my foot in a door that God might be closing, just because it was something I love to do, that I was good at. And so as we began to pray about that, it was a roller coaster. There were times we were like, this is absolutely crazy. And every time we would be in one of those valleys of the roller coaster, we'd get an email from somebody that said, we totally believe in what you're doing. We want to start supporting you. And, after 5 or 6 times of God smacking you upside the head saying, hey, I got this, it's like, oh, I guess I better trust him. God's saying, I'll take care of you. And that was an encouraging way to look at a very difficult time.
Billy, you're joining us. Catch you up to speed. We're taking the first few minutes to share basically one of the hardest times in your life where in hindsight you could see God shaping you and using it for good. And this is the concept that we're in a pandemic, just like the Israelites were in the desert or the disciples were on Saturday after the cross. None of us knows when this is going to be over. And each of us, it's impacting us differently. So we're not all in the exact same boat. Some of us are on staff, some people are in different positions. But all of us are having to deal with this in some way. And so the concept here is, as we look to our past, often God is asking us to look at where he's already been with us. And sometimes we need to look at other people's lives, because there's 2 ways to learn, I think, in life. One is you can basically put your hand on the stove and learn that way, or you can watch your friend put his hand on the stove and learn that way. So I'm hoping to learn from you guys today, not to put my hand on the stove. So any other stories that people have?
Stanley, can you hear me?
Yes.
I didn't want to talk before I had to, but I'm in the career. I'm in my second career now because it was really divinely orchestrated. When I left Bell South in 1989, I wanted to freelance, and I did it for about a year, and then my wife was offered a congressional fellowship through her job, so we had to move to DC. And I kind of went crying and kicking without her knowing it, because I didn't know anybody in DC and I didn't have any contacts. But to make a long story short, the first year I was able to be a better father to my young children. And then secondly, I was able to go to some of the museums and in Washington and look at other people's work. And eventually a job came open at the Catholic newspaper in Washington, and I was able to get that job. So it wasn't anything I had planned, but obviously, as the other gentleman said, Jeff, God kind of ordered my steps to where I am now.
You go ahead and share. Whoever you're, don't wait. Anybody can come, because I tell you, we're all going to learn something from each of you.
I'll share part of my journey. So for 6 years, I was the director of photography with the North American Mission Board. And in 2003, I was part of the first wave of downsizing. We have 4 sons, and my wife and I, and a mortgage to pay, and all that good stuff. And so I walked out of there thinking I'll freelance. And Fast forward to 2004 in the fall, in my backyard, I started having near blackouts and a whole lot of other mystery symptoms. And one thing led to the next, and I ended up talking to a friend who lives in Maryland, and she had just been treated for Lyme disease with IV intravenous therapy for several years. She said, I want you to go online and check out this checklist, because what you're sharing with me sounds an awful lot like Lyme disease. So I went and did the checklist. I had 22 symptoms, and went to my doctor and I said, look, I need to get tested for Lyme disease. And so he said, fine, you know, what are your symptoms? And got the test, and it came back negative. He said, but I'll treat you empirically. That means relating to the symptoms. So over the course of several weeks, 20 of the 22 symptoms disappeared, and I felt like I got my brain back. I mean, I was really to the point where I could not function. Anyway, we came to the point where it's kind of emotional, but where he said, I don't think you have it. I think it's anxiety. I think you're making it up. So he discontinued my drugs, and I immediately relapsed. So I called an advocacy organization in Washington, D.C., and left a voicemail message. It took a complete month for him to respond back. And in the meantime, I was toast. I couldn't drive. I had Bell's palsy in my face, which lasted several years. Sometimes I couldn't talk, sew words together. Cognitively, I was a mess. And when I went there, the doctor said, you're in really rough shape. I said, yeah, I am. So this has been part of a journey I've been on. And I'm in pretty good shape right now, but I'm subject to relapse. But what this has taught me is, first of all, is to take every day as a gift, is to look at what it is I can be thankful for every day, and not be so anxious about what I need for tomorrow. Even in the most basic of things, it's just given me an immense appreciation for the basics of life. And the other thing it's done for me too is it's given me a heart for other people who are going through suffering. Everybody's going through some kind of suffering at some time in their life, or they may be going through suffering here and now. And what I found is that people who've gone through deep waters are the people who I want to have a relationship with, because they have so much that they can share as a result of their suffering. Not that they circumvented suffering, but they actually went through it, if that makes sense. So that's my story.
Some of you guys have, I'm going to kind of twist this to see if this gets some of you guys to share a little bit more too, because I know some of your stories are pretty powerful. The question, I'll propose it a different way to you. Can you be a really good photographer of people if you haven't gone through something and been through your desert? Can you show and tell people stories of crisis and difficulties if you can't relate because you've not done it yourself? So is God preparing us to be better storytellers by allowing us to experience some things? Just a question.
I think there is the obvious empathy that you get from a similar circumstance, that when you go through something, you're sensitive to those things, like Robin, sensitive to issues with special needs kids with all of her stuff. She understands that community, and she can enter into that conversation with much more of a introspection than, say, I would. And I think based on past weeks when she has shared, that it's very definite that things have prepared. And I see Robin just popped up, and you know, her background, what she went through with her own family, that's given her a power and a strength that many others don't have.
That's well said, Philip. I would say lift your gaze up from your camera and from your story. I think going through this kind of stuff makes you a better human, which increases your, it can either make you a better person or it can make you a bitter, worse person, I guess, when you go through struggles. But you go through things, and so I agree with everything that's been said. You have an empathy, you have a sensitivity, you have a connection with the story. But more importantly than that, you have a connection potentially with other people, and God can use you to help other people through similar struggles because you have a credibility that you've been through it too. And therefore you can, and if you make yourself available, then you're there to help take someone's hand and take them through the same valley. And so if we let the Lord use it, I think, and this is something I aspire to do, I'm not saying I do it well, but then hopefully we can be an encourager or a co-laborer or a supporter or whatever with someone else. So I definitely think it improves the storytelling ability, but I also think it improves us as human beings if we let God use these things that we went through in our life to then pour into other people's lives who are going through similar struggles.
I think along with that, the next question could be like, do we have an obligation to take that experience and to be the voice for those that may not know how to be their own voice?
That's well said. I think we do, actually. I agree with you. I think we do have an obligation.
It makes us better listeners, which in turn we become better storytellers.
I think it becomes part of our, looking for the right word, part of our environment. Like several of you alluded that you really don't understand something until you've really gone through it yourself. And, I think in my experience with my 5 years in the desert, which is much less than 40, I remember the day that, the fellow that was leading our office was dismissed. We were all sitting around together, and I made the comment, I don't know why I stayed. And one of my colleagues looked at me and said, "You stayed for us." And that's what I mean by, experience like this creates, it's almost with your milieu that you're part of, or your economy, that you operate out of from that point on. And I think that is very much a God-given thing.
I think one thing that I was just kind of thinking of too is when you go through something, I feel like it kind of makes you like slow down and stop and think and not just be, go, go, go all the time. And so like, even if you're not necessarily have not gone through the exact same thing as, somebody else, I feel like you can still kind of appreciate, what they're going through, even if it's not exactly the same thing as what you've gone through. So like for me, things that I've gone through have kind of made things like slow down, where it helps me to like pause and really evaluate and watch and, think about how I can actually be part of this moment or capture this moment rather than, maybe not having that experience, if that makes sense.
Well, sometimes our purpose is to tell someone else's story, and sometimes our purpose, and I would say it's always this, is to be there for the person we're capturing their story. The ability to be present with whoever we're with, and it's amazing that I think it's kind of fun that these masks that we're wearing today are actually making us focus more with our eyes and our ears than with talking as much. So that's where my camera normally is. I don't know about you guys, but I've always had a mask. It's been my camera for years. And people always want, if I don't have my camera around my neck, sometimes people don't recognize me. I don't know if you guys had that same problem. They go, oh, I didn't recognize you without your camera. So what I want to do now is switch over to Michael, because Michael's one of the coolest people I know, and I'll let Michael just kind of take over and share what you've prepared for us today.
All right. Thank you, Stanley. Over the last few weeks, there've been some great presentations and high quality images and character people. I knew you were going to have a bad week at one point, so you invited me to present this week. Must be a slow week. All right, so I'll pull up my screen.
It's not gonna be easy.
All right, you should see, do you see images on your end?
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna do a slideshow, but for the purposes of this discussion, what I've tried to do is group my photo experiences with the Archdiocese of Atlanta into 5 categories: liturgical, news, portrait/feature, schools, and the Eucharistic Congress. So we'll start with the Eucharistic Congress first. The Eucharistic Congress is sort of what's the largest gathering of Catholics in the Southeast. It takes place annually, usually the month of June. It draws anywhere from 20 to 30,000 participants. It takes place at one of Georgia's largest convention centers, the Georgia International Convention Center, which is on the south side of the city by the airport. It starts on a Friday, and there's a track for young adult Catholics at one of the hotel ballrooms that's adjacent to the convention center. And then within the convention center, there's a opening mass and a healing service, which was the previous photo. The next morning, there is a outdoor procession that goes from outdoors into the convention center. Throughout the day, there are multiple tracks with various speakers. And then around 5 o'clock, it wraps up with a closing service in a mass. So we'll move on to schools. This is a school in Kennesaw, Georgia, St. Catherine of Siena. It's probably one of the last schools in the Archdiocese that still has a sister who's a principal, and then they have a few sisters mixed in with lay teachers. Their order is out of Nashville. They're called the Nashville Dominicans. When I first started with the Georgia Bulletin, which is a paper for the Catholic Archdiocese, they they didn't cover sports. So I thought it would be an opportunity to not only challenge myself, but to reach out to another demographic, the Catholic student athlete and the parents of student athletes. This is our former Archbishop. He left last year and he's in Washington, D.C. now, Wilton Gregory. Back in 2014, you might recall the Ice Bucket Challenge. You know, these people would have these challenges to raise money. Well, this was a elementary and middle school that invited him to participate. And being from Chicago, he took on a challenge, cold water. This is at a high school in Atlanta, St. Pius X. The gentleman down in the right foreground playing the guitar, I was actually meeting with him to talk about a possible story on a unique program they have at the school. They have a jazz and classical guitar program, which is the only one in any of the Catholic schools. And by the way, there are 18 Archdiocesan Catholic schools and six independent Catholic schools. Well, the guy on the drums, when I was meeting with a guitar instructor, he told me that there's a group of teachers that get together every year and they have what they call a teacher jam. And it usually takes place every spring, just before the end of school and just before finals. This is a football team. Actually, this is the Blessed Trinity. This is a school right in Stanley's neighborhood. But I want to draw your attention to the sign above them. We're kind of a big deal. It's one of those elements in the frame that had nothing to do with the photo really, but it helps enhance the story, I guess, because they were a kind of a big deal. This was their third consecutive state football championship in Class 4A. As you can see, the players are kind of emotional while the coach is trying to do an interview. The kid, all these happen to be the senior captains, and the young man holding up the trophy, his father passed away of pancreatic cancer like the week before. I think it was right between the semifinal game and the championship game. The next category would be liturgical. There are 102 parishes and missions in the Archdiocese of Atlanta, and that represents 69 counties in North Georgia. So if you kind of took half of the state, we would be the northern half. This is at a permanent diaconate ordination. Usually what happens after the ordination is I take a group shot of the new deacons with the Archbishop and the director of the program, but off to the side, the wives are usually standing looking on. So when I'm finished, they all come together and the deacons usually, I say usually, it started around 2016, and then it's taken on, it seems like every class since then has done it, but the deacons tend to give a first blessing to their wives. This is another permanent diaconate ordination. Sometimes I name my photos and I call this one the head of the class or heads of the class. They were 2 of the 8 men who were ordained that particular year. This was taken last month. This is the young man in the front. He is what we call a transitional deacon. He was ordained a deacon this year. He's a seminarian, and next year he will be ordained a priest. And this is kind of what a congregation looks like in today's pandemic. On the left is our new Archbishop. He was announced in March of this year, and then he was installed in May. I don't know if Alan is still on this Zoom meeting, but he coordinated the live stream because the installation was done before an pretty much empty cathedral. This was his first ordination of 3 new priests last month. So the next category would be news. And this is a March for Life, pro-life march through downtown Atlanta. This photo was taken in March of 2017. A deacon and his wife, they were at a fish fry at their parish, but while they were at a fish fry, a Cessna Citation crashed in the front yard, and the flames, the jet fuel ignited the flames and fried their house. The woman in the center, she's a centenarian. She turned 100 years old. They had a special mass to honor her. This was in the back of the church before the mass actually started, where they recognized her and they actually prayed over her. In the neighborhood of Virginia Highlands in Atlanta, they have the Missionaries of Charity, the order founded by Mother Teresa. They have a house where they minister and treat women with AIDS. The sister on the left is the Mother Superior of the house. The sister on the right, she's the Superior General of the order. So she's, in a sense, she's the current day Mother Teresa of the order. Her name is Sister Mary Prima. She, of course, she's actually German descent, but she lives in Calcutta, where the headquarters is. She came last, I think it was last May of 2019. It was really a low-key event. She just came to a house. They had a mass and a service in their backyard just for volunteers and benefactors. And here she is meeting one of the longtime volunteers. Last August, with the help of the U.S. Embassy in Mexico and the Mexican consulate, 44 elderly parents from Mexico were granted temporary visas to come to the United States. And they came to this mission in Lilburn, Georgia, and they were able to reunite with some of their children. This particular woman, she had not seen her mother for 18 years. This is a recent march for racial justice down at the downtown, actually from one of the Catholic churches, Shrine of the Immaculate Conception, which is a block over from the Capitol, state capitol, and they marched from there to Centennial Olympic Park, which is where this man is. They took, for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, they took a knee in memory of George Floyd. And then I'll wrap up with some portraits and features. This is a woman who's a AIDS activist in our parish, an artist in Helen, Georgia. Most of his artwork is of a religious nature. I don't know if Robin is stationary. I saw him earlier, he was driving, but this is a 6-year-old young girl with Down syndrome, and she was invited to, well, her parents had experienced some unfortunate situations where they had tried to get their daughter to participate in some sports activities and other things, and they didn't have quite a good experience, and they were reluctant to reach out to this basketball team at this Catholic school because it was a developmental program for kindergarten through 2nd grade, and to their surprise, they were more than happy to welcome her to the basketball team. This is a woman she's actually an instructor, a professor at Emory University, but she's part of a group that is trying to promote collaboration between laity and clergy, more collaboration between laity and clergy. And this is the final image, an image of the person that I serve and work for. And that's it.
Thank you so much.
I'll bring up one more thing since this is one of the projects I work on. Let me see here. Can you see the web
Yes.
page here?
We can see it.
Okay. One of the things I work on in between assignments for fun is, and since I'm sort of a unsacred relic around here now, I can do these things, but I call it then and now. And what I do is I try to find people that I photographed years ago, and then I go back, I photograph them again, and then I interview them and I do a story on them. This was the very first one I did on these young kindergarten students that I first photographed at a Martin Luther King celebration. 2 of the 7 students went on to other schools, but the other 5 stayed together and they went to middle school together, elementary and middle school. So that's one. The other one was I photographed this guy when he was a 4th grader at his Catholic school. And actually I did a Q&A with him, but he is now the boys basketball coach at St. Pius, the 10th high school, the high school where the photo earlier, the teacher jam. And then the last one, the most recent one, because I haven't done any this year. I had 2 planned, but because of the pandemic, I haven't been able to do them. But these 2 young ladies, I photographed them when our former Archbishop was first installed. During his installation, they were one of the groups of people who met him and welcomed him to the city. So when he left last year, I went back and found them and did a story on where they are now. So that's it. Then and now. That's what I call it. And the graphics person at our paper, he did a nice, colorful logo for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice work, Michael.
What kind of questions do you have for Michael? He loves to use a little signage. I noticed in the background with the guy kneeling. That big, huge wall really helped in the protest.
Yeah, I kind of like using other elements in the frame to help enhance what I'm trying to tell in the photo.
That's what I was thinking. Your work is so obviously, you're attentive to everything in that frame, and it's intentional, and it makes some powerful images. Michael, thanks for sharing those.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate the layers of your compositions, Michael, that really add to the storytelling. And I really appreciate your work in changing your point of view, especially when you got down on the floor. That was a powerful way to shoot that image. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Hey, Michael, I really like your work, buddy. What was it like when you decided to offer coverage for the sports when it hadn't been done before?
Well, I didn't get any pushback because nobody else on the staff seems interested in covering sports. So it was easy from that standpoint. It was just, sometimes it becomes a real commitment if you're trying to write and do the photos. The athletic directors at the school, they love the coverage, because it's just another component to promote their schools.
So you didn't get any pushback at all then?
No, not at all. No.
What was the
In
response?
fact, I'm sorry.
Yeah, what was the response to the writing, and how did people respond to that new coverage when they saw the new things you were doing?
Like I said, that the schools, they enjoy the additional coverage. I'm sure the youngsters who now, well, most people recognize me, like Stanley said, they probably wouldn't recognize me without a camera, but most students recognize me with the camera. So if they see me coming to a game, they usually know that coverage is coming. So.
I'll jump in real quick, and sorry, I got called by my boss. I work with Michael here, and I started 6 years ago, and I had a video camera, and Michael's a legend in the Archdiocese of Atlanta. And I remember when I first started going around to churches with a camera, everybody was freaking out, and they're like, "Where's Michael? What happened to Michael? What is Michael doing?" Because they all thought that I was coming to replace Michael. So he's an awesome photographer, and does really well here in Atlanta, and we're proud and lucky to have him for sure.
Well, thanks, Alan. Alan and I, we collaborate on a lot of stuff, especially liturgical. If I'm at the cathedral for anything, Alan is always going to be there as well. And Alan's that last image of the cross by the stained glass window, that's in a chapel here in our building. And Alan, he's been an Iron Man. He's been doing a live stream every day, Monday through Friday, since about March. So people who want to go to Mass online can tune in every day at noon and see Alan live streaming the Mass. So.
Do you write?
I forgot who it was. Someone who mentioned the shot that I took at the low angle. Well, one of the things about covering stuff in the Archdiocese, a lot of it is repetitious. The liturgy is the same. The faces may change, but the order of the liturgy is the same, or the rite. So you find yourself challenged by trying to do something different. So You go high, you go low, but you can't, but you got to, and you also have to do it without bringing attention to yourself, you know, because you're not the focus of attention. The Lord is. So you have to be a model of decorum and almost render yourself invisible. So.
You know, I expected that, Michael, that a lot of repetition. I mean, you know, my experience within my faith group is the same sort of thing. And it just really pleased me to see how many different ways that you could approach the same thing and come out with something that's just magnificent.
Well, I know Stanley Gibbs has helped out inside the church. I don't think you ever did the Eucharist Congress, did you, Gibbs?
I didn't. Mm-mm.
No, but Stanley has, and Stanley knows what a chore the Eucharistic Congress is. And Alan knows too, because he covers it as a videographer. I mean, it happens every year, and you struggle sometimes to come up with a different photograph or to capture a different, because you find yourself saying, didn't I take that photo last year? But it all works out. You know, God always, you know, I always say I've never taken a photograph that God didn't see first. So I kind of lean on him to help me see something that I haven't seen before, you know. The other thing is, you know, once I did a search on the word light in the Bible, and there's about, I think there's over 250 references to light in the Bible. There's the lowercase light that we all find essential to what we do as photographers. And then there's the uppercase light, referring to Jesus, the light of the world. So in order for, I think a lot of times, in order for me to create an interesting photo, the lowercase light has to be in sync with the uppercase light. You know, I think.
So I've got another question. The thing I like about your style, Michael, is that you give us a lot of variety in terms of, you know, intimate and fill the frame and then backing up. And so the vantage point varies quite a bit. Was that always your approach, or did it take, you know, were you always, you know, real close and in that tight, intimate space with your subject matter, or was that something that evolved over time?
I think it evolved over time, because in the beginning, I was probably, especially in a church setting, I was probably a little adamant and reluctant to get too close to people. But over the years, as they've kind of seen me work and I've earned their respect and they're comfortable with me, and I've kind of pushed the envelope, you know, and gotten closer. Who was that? Who's the photographer? Robert Capper, who used to say, if you're not close enough, it's not good enough. So yeah, I try to strike a balance, but like that first image of the woman at the Eucharistic Congress, I mean, I was close enough, but I was yet far away because I was using a long lens. And I could still see the tears in her eyes as she was praying for something that was on her heart.
You know, as long as you've worked now, is there ever a time where you will be confronted with the situation with the unfamiliar, the people who aren't really initiated with who you are and what it is you're doing there? Or is it always just smooth sailing in terms of your access and just becoming invisible?
I think now it's easier now that I've been around. Like I said, I'm sort of an unsacred relic now. People know me. But in the beginning, yeah, in the beginning, both here and in Washington at the paper there, Catholic paper there, yeah, it was, and there were times when I was often going into a predominantly white church, and here's this guy, black guy with a camera pointing it, at them. Yeah, it was a little apprehensive in the beginning, but I try to be respectful, and I try to disarm people by, just, treating them like I hope, they would expect to be treated.
Michael, oh, go ahead, Alan.
I was just thinking, I gather from seeing your photos, it's like seeing people who've shot film for years, that you must be very conservative in your shooting, typically trying to see what you're going for and then go for it and take your photos and move out instead of taking hundreds of photos. Is that true? Or how do you typically see yourself? I see many young photographers, of course, go and shoot lots and lots of pictures. They're not really sure of what they're looking for.
Yeah, I take, my light went off, sorry. I kind of take the tortoise or turtle approach. I kind of, especially when I'm photographing somebody who's speaking, okay? I might have the camera up to my face, but I want to watch their mechanics or how they use their hands or do they look down, do they look up, But I've been next to photographers and they're on that shutter and, and if it was a assault rifle, the person be dead. But I'm a more conservative, like you said, maybe shooting film helped me grow into that type of mentality. But yeah, I try to study the moment and the environment, and I also look at all sides of the room. Sometimes it's hard to do in a church because you don't want to get up and so fortunately in a Catholic church there's a lot of standing, kneeling, standing. So when people stand, that's when I move. When they kneel or sit, that's when I get down. I forgot to I have a seat cushion. I didn't bring it, but it's in my trunk. Alan probably seen it. But I kneeled on that seat cushion because in churches, you got to either concrete or marble floor, and that allows me to stay low,
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, anyways, thanks for your answer. That sounds good. Thanks.
Michael, I was thinking about Stanley's first question when we opened it up today. And, you relayed about how you had that move. And now, you showed us this Then and Now series that you continue to work on. And it's almost like you did your own Then and Now today with a presentation. This was then, back when I had to go to Washington, D.C., and it's now. And maybe could you offer us a perspective of what the now is now that you look back at the Washington, D.C., so many years ago, and we've moved forward now where you've got a very deep, rich portfolio?
Well, at the time I went to Washington, like I said, I had no idea what I was gonna end up doing. But fortunately, God knew. And as it turned out, that was the best training ground, because Washington, D.C., their archdiocese. I mean, there's more Catholics, for one thing. There's more Catholics in the D.C., Maryland area. So it was a great training ground, which enabled me to, transition from from Washington to Atlanta, and not to take away anything from Atlanta. In the beginning, when I came back to Atlanta, it was really in a growth spurt. A lot of people had been moving from the North, Midwest to Atlanta, and the Catholic population was starting to grow. In the beginning, I felt like I was doing a lot of groundbreakings, and because the church was growing so much. They built a number of new schools, a number of new churches, but Washington allowed me, like I said, it was a good training ground. It was almost, using a Greg Thompson analogy, it was almost like going from the major leagues to a minor league, or a fast pitch, because Washington is more political, to a more slow pitch environment, which has actually picked up to a faster pitch here in the Archdiocese since probably the beginning of the new millennium.
I thought I'd ask one last question for you. And the question is, I've noticed that you started as a photographer, but then you've been writing a lot. And also, as you were sharing your pictures, the narrative behind the pictures was almost as powerful as the picture itself. And can you tell us about your kind of journey as being the writer, and when that became part of how you made that part of your job, and how do you see that impacting the final product that the people see in the paper? Is that a better package because you're writing and doing the pictures? And has it made you a better photographer? And has the taking the pictures made you a better writer? Maybe, how does that all work together?
That's an interesting question. I think the writing, I wanted to challenge myself. I felt like I wasn't a complete photojournalist until I could wield the pen like I could wield the camera. I don't think I'm a great writer by any stretch of the imagination, but I think I feel more complete, and I'm kind of like, I feel like Gary in a sense. My wife is actually a good writer, so she edits everything I write before I give it to my editors, and they're not around, but actually it passes all the tests. But it's actually been fun in some respects, but hard. And I don't write all the time. It has to be, the spirit has to move me to write. I mean, it's hard for me because once I do it, I'm all in, So and I want to do a great job at it. So, and I don't want people to look at my writing and say, oh, okay, that's another good or compelling story in the paper. I don't want people to say, oh, that's the photographer, he's taking a stab at writing,
Do you feel that since you write also that it's given you more, I want to see if I say this right, more respect?
Credibility.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've had some people to say to me, you should write more, but no, I'm good.
That's good to hear. It could be something else they could be saying. Well, thank you guys all for this week. I don't have anybody for next week. If anybody would like to share next week, let me know. Amanda, you can share if you want to with the group. And Ken, if he's ever up to it, I've been trying for years to get him to share some of his work. But and if you sign up to share and you can't do it because you're not feeling well, that's okay too. So let me know if any of you are interested in doing that or have somebody else to add to the group. Was this helpful today for everybody?
It was good, Stanley.
Yeah, great.
Good, Stanley.
So my wife has been doing a new group, and I think I'll just let you guys know a little thing that I think the secret sauce of this group is. It's called peer support in other groups. They talk about fire department people and people in police going out on calls, and they see things. And then my wife goes and trains people in fire departments, police departments, and all that about when they see things, because she's done a lot with PTSD and with journalists, that as you talk amongst yourselves and other professionals, because you understand what you're dealing with, that it helps you process and grow. And ever since we got together as photographers, I think it was when I started with Don Rutledge, and then slowly it became Southwestern Photojournalism Conference. And then Gibbs and Gary and I were talking about, we need to do this in Atlanta. And this Zoom thing is something kind of surprising to me, because I've enjoyed the fact that I'm sitting we're getting a group of people from all over the world here, and that's kind of cool. So I'm hoping you can join us next week. And any last comments from anybody? Okay, well, I'll see you guys next week.
Thanks, Stanley.
Thank you,
Good job,
Stan.
Michael.
Thanks, Michael.
Thanks,
Great
Michael.
presentation.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Michael.
All right. Happy birthday, Gibbs.
Thank you.
Happy birthday, Gibbs.
Thank
Happy
you.
birthday, Gibbs.
Happy birthday, Gibbs.
It's your birthday, Gibbs?
Happy birthday.
Thank you. See you later.
So long, guys. Have a good weekend.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye, guys.